I've always loved May evenings in Georgetown, Texas. There's something about the way the golden sun dips behind the hills, the warm breeze rustling through the oaks, and the smell of freshly cut grass that makes everything feel timeless. Usually, I'd be sitting on my porch swing with a cup of chamomile tea, listening to the cicadas hum while the sky fades from blue to lavender. But not today. Today, my house felt like a beehive on fire, people coming in and out, voices bouncing off the hardwood floors, the faint smell of perfume clashing with roasted chicken and candle wax. My daughter, Lauren, was turning 39. Not exactly a milestone, I thought. But to her, every birthday deserved red carpet treatment. She insisted on throwing a full-blown party with catered food, fancy decor, a custom cake, and over 30 guests all in my house. Mom, nobody does small birthdays anymore, she had said with a wave of her manicured hand. This one's going to be fabulous. I had tried to suggest something simple. A backyard BBQ, maybe. Just family. But she dismissed it with a laugh. You don't get it. Mom, it's 2025. Maybe I didn't. At 67, I often felt like the world had started speaking a language I no longer understood. Why buy a $900 dress you'd wear once? Why is a bottle of wine considered good only if it's older than your children? And why did my home, my sanctuary for over 40 years, feel like a stranger's place whenever my kids were in it? I stood at the kitchen island, staring at my reflection in the polished chrome of the coffee machine. The lines around my eyes had grown deeper this past year. My once rich chestnut hair was now mostly silver. I dabbed on a bit of pink lipstick, the only makeup I bothered with these days, and smoothed the fabric of my favorite navy blue dress, the one with little white flowers. Simple, elegant. Ray had loved me in that dress. You look like a queen, Eleanor, he would whisper, smiling like I was the only woman on earth. Ray passed away 5 years ago. In his sleep, no pain, no drama, just slipped away one night, the way only kind men do. He was my anchor, a mechanic who took pride in rebuilding engines, and never once raised his voice. We had built this life together. This house. This family. Without him, things had begun to feel hollow. From the living room came the booming laugh of my oldest, Tyler. He had Ray's height, but none of his quiet charm. Loud, opinionated, always performing for a crowd. His wife, Melania, was fussing with the wine glasses. Their teenage kids, Brooke and Nate, had already disappeared into a corner, faces glued to their phones like it was a survival mechanism. Suddenly, Lauren stormed into the kitchen like a Texas tornado in heels. Mom, have you seen my clutch? She snapped. The green Michael Kors one, I left it in your bathroom. I haven't seen it, sweetheart, I replied, wiping my hands on a towel. Maybe check your makeup bag, she rolled her eyes. I know where I left it. You just don't pay attention. As usual. With that, she spun around and walked out, leaving behind a cloud of perfume and something heavier disdain. I turned back to the salad I was chopping. These little jabs had become more frequent lately, each one tiny on its own. But together, they added up to a quiet kind of heartbreak. It was like being erased, one comment at a time. What they didn't realize, what Lauren didn't know, was that something inside me had already started to shift. A whisper, low and firm, had begun to rise within me. It said, you're still here. And this is not how your story ends. The house was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and music humming low from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Lauren stood at the center of it all, radiant in her ivory cocktail dress. Her hair was perfect, her makeup impeccable, her voice animated as she entertained her guests from the real estate firm. She knew how to command attention, always had. She didn't inherit that from me. I moved through the crowd like a ghost in my own home, smiling politely at names I didn't remember, clearing empty glasses, refilling trays, and fluffing pillows that no one would notice. Somewhere between the hallway and the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, shoulders slightly hunched, hands full, smile tight. I didn't look like the hostess. I looked like the help. But it was fine. That's what I told myself. Lauren was happy. That was what mattered. Right. The cake was the last thing on my list. A homemade chocolate raspberry tort, her childhood favorite. I had spent all morning baking it from scratch, layering the filling just right, decorating it with piped cream and chocolate shavings. A simple happy birthday Lauren sat on top in white icing. 40 candles would have been too much, so I'd chosen 4 golden stars instead. As I walked into the living room, cake in hands, the room began to quiet. Oh my God, that smells amazing, someone said. Tyler started clapping. Others joined in. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt seen. Lauren stood near the fireplace, wine glass in hand, laughing with a blonde woman I didn't recognize. When she turned and saw me approaching, her smile faltered. Then came the whisper, just loud enough for me to hear. You guys? She giggled to her friend. She looks exactly like my cleaning lady. Her friend gasped, stifled a laugh behind manicured nails. I stopped mid-step. The warmth in the room drained like someone had pulled the plug. The cake suddenly weighed more in my hands. My smile froze. Mid-air, hanging there with the silence that followed. Tyler sweet. Clueless Tyler let out a nervous chuckle. She means Consuela. You know? The one who wears floral dresses. 2. He trailed off. Even he knew it didn't help. I set the cake down on the table. Slowly, deliberately, the candles flickered, casting tiny shadows across Lauren's flawless face. She looked at me with a vague sense of surprise, like she didn't understand why I wasn't laughing. It was just a joke. Mom, she said, don't take it so seriously. But I wasn't listening. My ears were ringing. My chest felt tight. Not with anger, but something deeper. Something hollow. I turned around and walked out of the room. No one stopped me. No one followed. Upstairs, I closed the door to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The party noise drifted up through the floorboards' laughter. Music. A clink of champagne flutes. They had moved on. Just like that? She looks like my cleaning lady. It wasn't the comparison that hurt. I had nothing but respect for women who did honest work. It was the tone. The effortless disrespect. The way my own daughter could diminish me in front of strangers and not even flinch. I pulled the curtain aside and stared out at the twilight. The Texas sky stretched wide, golden light giving way to purple dusk. Somewhere beyond those clouds, Ray would have been shaking his head. What would he say if he saw this? If he saw how far we'd drifted from what we once were? This house used to be filled with laughter, with muddy shoes by the door, with kids sneaking cookies before dinner, and Ray humming along to old country songs while fixing the sink. Now it was a showroom, a stage for someone else's performance. And I was the forgotten prop. That night, something shifted inside me. Not broken, not bruised, but unchained. And once something inside you breaks free, You can't pretend it never happened. I didn't cry that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands resting in my lap, as if waiting for something to arrive and knock on the door. An apology. A glimmer of recognition from downstairs that maybe, just maybe, someone had gone too far. But the hallway stayed quiet. The party played on. I looked at my hands. The veins were more visible now. Skin thinner than it used to be. Spotted with age. These were the hands that had rocked cribs, packed lunches, signed field trip slips, and bandaged scraped knees. These were the hands that had held Ray's as he lay motionless in that hospital bed 5 years ago. The hands that had built a life meal by meal, chore by chore, choice by choice. Now, they were the hands of someone who didn't matter anymore. I got up, walked slowly to the closet, and opened the heavy wooden doors. It still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender sachets. On the top shelf sat a small gray box. I hadn't touched it in years. I pulled it down, carried it over to the bed, and opened the lid. Inside were the documents Ray and I had kept organized like a sacred ritual deed to the house. His will, insurance papers, a few letters he had written me during his National Guard service, and a crumpled birth certificate for Caleb. So much history, packed into one small box. I stared at the property deed. My name, Eleanor M. Sanders, sole owner. For years I had let that fact slide into the background. Not because I forgot, but because it never seemed to matter. This was our home. The kids' home. The anchor of the family. Even after they left. They never really left. Tyler had stayed for a few months during his divorce, and somehow never left. Lauren and Zach moved in just for the summer while they waited on permits for their custom build. That was over a year ago. One by one, they moved back into my house. And piece by piece, I disappeared from it. My kitchen became Melanie's prep station. My guest room turned into Brooke's study nook. My living room morphed into Zach's Zoom background. I wasn't asked. It just happened. Because I was mom. Because I was fine with it. But I wasn't. Not anymore. It wasn't just the insult Lauren had whispered. That was the match. The spark. But the fire had been building for years, lit by every eye roll. Every demand dressed as a favor. Every assumption that I would bend and fold and stay put. That night, something inside me cracked, not like glass. Not sharp and loud, but like earth after a drought. Quiet. Slow. Irreversible. I made a decision. I would sell the house. Not to punish them. Not even to make a statement. But because, for the first time in a long time, I realized I had choices. I had rights. I had one life. And I wasn't going to spend the rest of it tiptoeing around adult children who saw me as furniture. The next morning, I rose before dawn. The party cleanup was still scattered across the kitchen, empty wine glasses. A plate of half-eaten bruschetta. A trail of cake crumbs like confetti from some parade I had never been invited to. I made myself a cup of black coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise over the hills. The sky was pink and brave and full of promise. I picked up the phone and called the only person I could trust with this kind of change, Orlando Willoughby, the lawyer Ray and I had used when we revised our wills a decade ago. Mrs. Sanders, said the cheery assistant who picked up. It's been a while. Yes, I said, my voice steady, calm. I'd like to talk to someone about selling my home. And just like that, the next chapter of my life began. Quietly. Deliberately. Powerfully. Monday morning came with a strange kind of clarity. For the first time in years, I had a plan and it was mine alone. Not something dictated by one of my children. Not part of someone else's timeline or to-do list. Mine. I dressed in a gray blazer I'd kept in the back of the closet since Ray's funeral. It still fit. Still had the faint smell of the cedar closet lining. I paired it with black slacks and my pearl earrings. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I needed to feel composed, decisive. Tyler was already in the kitchen, nursing a hangover and pouring himself strong black coffee. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, barely looking up. "That whiskey last night, not my best idea." "Good morning, honey," I said, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. "I'll be out for a bit. Just have a few errands in town." He grunted in acknowledgement, eyes glued to his phone. "What kind of errands?" I smiled faintly. "Lawyer stuff. Routine documents. Nothing big." That got his attention. He looked up, brows furrowed. "Everything okay, taxes?" "No. Nothing like that." I sipped my tea. "Just updating some things." He didn't push, but I saw the questions in his eyes. I didn't offer any more. It wasn't time yet. I grabbed my purse and slipped out the door. The air was crisp for late spring. Georgetown had that sleepy town vibe in the morning, slow-moving trucks. Older men at diners talking politics over biscuits and gravy. Birds chirping from porches that all looked a little too alike. I drove into Austin and pulled up in front of a red brick building tucked between an old record store and a law office that had probably been around since the 70s. The brass plate on the door still read Willoughby and Associates. Real estate and probate law. Inside, I was greeted by a smiling woman with glasses and red lipstick who introduced herself as Darla, Orlando Willoughby's assistant. "Mrs. Sanders," she said, rising from her desk. "We haven't seen you in years. I'm so glad you called." "Thank you. I didn't expect to be back either," I said, my voice calm but resolute. She led me into Orlando's office, where the familiar face of a tall, silver-haired woman greeted me with a warm handshake. "Eleanor," she said, settling into her leather chair. "You look as sharp as ever. What brings you in?" I sat down across from her and folded my hands. "I'm ready to sell the house." Her eyes didn't widen with surprise. Instead, she gave a thoughtful nod and leaned back. "Tell me more." So I did. Not everything, but enough. About how the house no longer felt like mine. How I needed a change. How it was time. Legally. The process would be simple. Ray had left everything to me. And the house was paid off years ago. There were no liens. No complications. "Do your children have any legal claim?" she asked gently. "None," I replied. "They've lived there." "Yes. But I've never signed over a single thing." "Then it's your decision." "Entirely." That sentence hit me with an unexpected force. It really was mine. I wasn't asking permission. I wasn't borrowing anyone's timeline. I asked Orlando if she knew a realtor who could be discreet. Someone not connected to Lauren or her agency. She smiled knowingly. "I have just the person." She handed me a name, Samantha Brooke, owner of a small independent firm out of Round Rock. She's smart, trustworthy, and understands privacy. Later that afternoon, I met with Samantha over tea at a quiet cafe tucked beside a garden center. She listened more than she spoke, asked questions that mattered, took notes without judging. We made a plan she'd come to the house the next morning, under the guise of an insurance appraiser. She'd photograph the rooms, measure the square footage, and we'd go from there. As I drove back home, I felt a weight lift off me. For the first time in decades, I was doing something for myself. Not for my kids. Not to be agreeable. Not to keep the peace. Just for me. And it felt like the first deep breath after being underwater for far too long. The evening Caleb arrived. The sky was unusually clear. A soft Texas breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of cut grass and honeysuckle. I had made his favorite chicken pot pie with a golden crust and brewed sweet tea just the way Ray used to. We all sat down together for dinner for the first time in months. Lauren was on her phone, texting between bites. Tyler was halfway into a story about a client who wanted to trade in a motorcycle for a boat. Melanie was fussing with the salad dressing. Caleb sat quietly, absorbing everything as always, watching like he always had since he was a boy. I waited for a lull in the conversation. It came just after dessert. I have something to share, I said, folding my napkin slowly. 4 heads turned toward me. Caleb's expression softened. Lauren froze, her wine glass midair. I've decided to sell the house. The silence was instant, the kind that drops like a brick in a swimming pool. Lauren's hand slowly set her glass down. Tyler blinked. Sell? What he asked? The house. I repeated calmly. I've already met with a lawyer and a realtor. It'll go on the market next week. Lauren scoffed. You can't be serious. I am. But this is our home, Tyler added, his voice rising. What about all our stuff, the kids, the family holidays? It's my home. I replied gently. And I've given myself for a long time. But I need something different now. Lauren shook her head, almost laughing. You're not thinking clearly. Is this about that stupid comment I made at the party, Mom? It was a joke. You're seriously selling the house over a joke. I looked at her. Not angry. Not bitter, just tired. This isn't about one night. I said, this is about years of being overlooked. Being used. Being expected to stay quiet and available. Without question. I've had enough. Tu laisse tout. You're overreacting. Caleb finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. She's not. Everyone turned to him. I saw it, too, he said. How you all treat her. Like she's the help. Like her opinions don't count. She has the right to make this decision. Lauren's lips tightened. This is crazy. What are we even supposed to do? Where are we supposed to live? You'll figure it out. I replied calmly. You always do. I'll give everyone 60 days after the house sells to find other arrangements. Melania, for once, looked genuinely remorseful. Eleanor, I didn't realize you felt this way. That's the problem, I said. None of you did. Or maybe you did. And you just thought I wouldn't say anything. Lauren got up, her chair scraping loudly. So, that's it. You're walking away from us, from your own family. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm finally walking toward something. She didn't answer, just walked out, slamming the sliding door behind her. I heard her car peel out of the driveway a minute later. The room stayed silent. Tyler sat back down, shaking his head. I didn't know you had it in you, he said, half amazed, half resentful. I smiled. Neither did I. Until I had to. That night, I stood alone on the back porch, the stars sprawling above like scattered salt. Caleb joined me, leaning quietly against the railing. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. Thank you, I whispered. He didn't ask for an explanation. He didn't try to change my mind. He just stood with me. And that was enough. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a beige stucco building on the edge of Round Rock, staring at a small bronze plaque that read, Sunrise Acres, Independent Living for Active Adults. In my hand were the keys to apartment 2B. Behind me was everything I had once thought permanent, the creaky porch swing, the dented garage door Ray never got around to fixing, the echo of children's feet running through hallways, now filled with boxes and strangers. I took a breath and turned the key. The door opened with a soft click. Inside was silence. Clean beige walls, polished hardwood floors, and sunlight flooding through white blinds. A one-bedroom apartment with a tiny kitchen, a modest living room, and just enough space to breathe. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and let out a long, quiet exhale. No one was calling for dinner. No one had left dishes in the sink. No voice demanded where the remote was. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was holy. I had brought only what mattered: Ray's photo in its old wooden frame, the blue and white quilt I'd sewn the year Lauren was born, a set of good dishes, and the apple pie recipe card my mother had written in her perfect cursive. Everything else sold, donated, left behind, and I felt lighter because of it. The next morning, I met my neighbor Judy, a tall woman in her early 70s with cropped gray hair, gold hoop earrings, and a smile that could disarm a state trooper. She held out a tin of banana muffins like it was currency. I'm across the hall. Apartment 2A. She said, Don't worry, we don't do bingo and prune juice unless you want to. I laughed for what felt like the first time in weeks. Judy quickly became my unofficial welcome committee, life coach, and co-conspirator. She introduced me to the local senior yoga class at the rec center, the book club at the library, and a basic computer course taught by a former Google engineer who retired early to give back. I was skeptical. Me computers. But I showed up. And slowly, I started learning how to email, how to video call, even how to write little posts on a blog I titled Late Blooming. Nothing fancy. Just musings about life, change, and courage after 60. Then came the hospice. Judy mentioned a local nonprofit, Havenlight, that worked with palliative care patients and needed volunteers, especially those with a background in nursing. You were a nurse, weren't you? She asked one evening over tea. Yes, I replied quietly. A long time ago. You still are, she said. That kind of care never leaves you. I signed up for the orientation on a whim, but from the moment I stepped inside that quiet, gentle building, I knew I had found something sacred. I wasn't patching wounds or administering meds. My job was to sit beside those who were dying, and simply be there, to listen, to hold a hand, to remind them that they were still seen. It was hard. Some nights I cried. Some mornings I sat in the parking lot, gathering myself before going in, but I also felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. There was meaning in this work, in this new life, in showing that the last chapters didn't have to be empty, they could be full of purpose. My children didn't understand. Tyler asked, Why don't you just relax? Travel, you've earned it. Lauren called once and said, You volunteering with terminal patients, that's morbid. But Caleb smiled when I told him, You've always been the strongest person I know. He said, Now the world's just catching up. December arrived gently in Round Rock. The Texas kind of winter crisp air. Soft fog in the mornings, and just enough chill to wear your favorite scarf without irony. I stood at my kitchen counter, a cup of cinnamon tea warming my hands, staring out the window as the sky turned pale blue. In the oven, a turkey slow roasted, golden and aromatic. On the counter, the pie's apple, pecan, and one store-bought pumpkin. Because nobody's perfect. Today, for the first time in 3 months, my entire family was coming to my new place. I had invited them for a holiday lunch. No expectations. No lectures. No arguments. Just a table. A meal. And maybe if we were lucky, a second chance. I had set the table with care white dishes rimmed in cobalt blue, cloth napkins, and a new runner I'd found at a flea market, with embroidered snowflakes stitched in silver. Nothing extravagant, just beautiful in its own quiet way. When the doorbell rang, I took a breath. I didn't feel nervous, just grounded. I had spent these past few months building something that was mine. And now, I was ready to open the door to it. Tyler and Melanie arrived first, their kids in tow. Nate gave a half-hearted "Hey, Grandma," but Brooke actually looked up from her phone and blinked. "Whoa, Grandma," she said, eyes wide. "You look cool." "Thanks, sweetheart." I smiled. Turns out it's never too late. Caleb followed with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of yellow tulips. "Still your favorite?" he asked. "Always," I said, hugging him tightly. Lauren came last, fashionably late as ever, with Avery trailing behind. She looked at the building, then at me. "You really live here?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "I do," I said calmly, "and I like it." Inside, we sat down to lunch. The conversation was polite, if a bit hesitant. Tyler talked about work. Melanie complimented the salad. Caleb cracked a few gentle jokes, smoothing over awkward pauses like a seasoned mediator. Even Lauren, though quieter than usual, seemed to try. She commented on the table runner, asked how the hospice work was going, though her tone still carried that thin layer of judgment she hadn't learned to shed. After dessert, while the kids were in the living room scrolling TikTok and sipping cider, the adults lingered at the table. Tyler leaned back in his chair, watching me. "You know, Mom," he said, "when you sold the house, I thought you were losing your mind." I looked at him, steady, and now he shrugged. "Now, I think maybe you were finally finding it." There was a moment of silence. Not awkward, just honest. Lauren set down her coffee. "I didn't handle it well," she admitted, voice soft. "What I said that night, I was careless. I was trying to be funny. And I hurt you." "You did," I said gently. "But that night just revealed something I'd been ignoring for years. It wasn't just you." "I know." Her eyes dropped. "I was scared. Of losing the house. Of losing you. You didn't lose me." I said, "I just stopped letting everyone else write my story." Avery came in then, holding a school folder. "Grandma, I was wondering, do you think I could visit your hospice sometime? For my health science project, I really want to understand what end-of-life care is like." Lauren looked startled. I smiled. "I'd be honored." I said, "It's not always easy, but it's meaningful." As the afternoon faded, we moved to the couch for board games and quiet conversation. The kids laughed. The grown-ups finally relaxed. And me, I sat with a warm cup of tea, surrounded by people who were just beginning to see me, not as their maid, or their doormat, or even just their mom, but as a woman, a whole, breathing, beautiful woman. One who had let go of guilt, one who had chosen herself, and one who, against all odds, had bloomed.